Good afternoon, Racket Athlete podcast fans. Welcome to another episode of the Racket Athlete podcast. First of all, I would like to mention again my sponsor, Tayside String and Services, who have their own website. They're also on social media, Facebook and Instagram. They very much do a lot of quality restringing of rackets for badminton, tennis, and squash. So if you're in the area and you're looking for restringing, I recommend going to these guys. Or if you're a little bit further away, go on their website. They have their own website. Just look up Tayside String and Services. So today's guest we'll have on is Rachel from Biomechanics Education Academy. She'll tell you a little bit about herself, what her background is, etc., etc. Welcome to the show, Rachel. How are we doing?
Yeah, thanks for inviting me on. I had a little listen through some of your historic podcasts, actually.
Yes.
Done a bit of Gary Mendoza. I know Clive Brewer. So I'm actually now trawling through them all. So thank you for sharing those.
That's okay. I mean, as I say, I'm always looking to bring on some great guests, and obviously I've connected with you through social media, LinkedIn, and obviously I know about your courses, etc. as well. I haven't done one yet, but obviously may be doing that in the future, depending on how I go. Can we just first find out about who you are, Rachel, and what your background is, and how you become into biomechanics?
Yeah, kind of an eclectic background, really. I was originally a professional dancer many moons ago. When I was 21, I wasn't that good, actually. I just put my hand up when somebody said, oh, one of the girls has broken a leg. Do you want to come out and help out?
Yeah.
So I went on a 3-month contract to Greece and came home 6 years later after traveling around all of Greece for a couple of years, also Tokyo, Hong Kong. And it was predominantly cabaret dancing. So that really set the tone because at school I was a non-academic. And the more I've worked in this industry, which is sort of 3 decades now, the more I feel an alliance with a lot of people come through into the movement sector with a similar background to me. So I fell into dancing. It was just, I enjoyed it. Got lucky, 6 years as a career as a professional dancer. And in that time, my Greek dance agent, Dimitri, he's 78 now, and he's got the body of a 20-year-old bodybuilder. He's amazing. He encouraged me to use a gym. He had a gym as well in Athens. Yeah. And that really started to inspire me. So when I came home in 1996, I joined the gym and I actually started doing care work. For about 10 years, I worked with elderly, disabled individuals, started off with an agency and then went into private work. And at the same time as I was doing that paid, I started investing in a group exercise qualification, gym instructor, sports therapy, etc. And the common theme through all of that was movement, bodies, human bodies, disabled bodies, elderly bodies, dynamic bodies, bodies in a class, in a group, bodies in a gym. And I just felt that being around that kind of movement, bodies, that I just followed my nose kind of thing. I wasn't, or it didn't feel very bright or very academic from my schooling. I just did what I enjoyed. Yeah. So it all kind of started to come together quite nicely. And thankfully, in 2006, one of the members of the gym that I was managing at the time approached me. He's called Martin Haynes, and he's a chartered physiotherapist, a world leader in biomechanics. And he explained to me he'd done some research. So as a physiotherapist, he felt that physiotherapy very often failed when he was working with a lot of his clients. You know, back in the day, you're probably a bit too young, but any of the listeners who know Davey Thomson, Linford Christie, Derek Redmond, so not racket sports, but track and field type sports.
Yeah.
They were his clients, and they would come with a shoulder problem. As a physio, he was trained to assess and treat their shoulder. However, they would come back 6 months later with the same problem. So he felt physiotherapy was kind of failing him quite a bit. He was very lucky to have £750,000 worth of isokinetic machines. Now, back in the 80s, that was a huge sort of positive on his part. So all the other physios in London were bringing their clients to him. So he had this kind of endless supply of celebrities, Demi Moore, Lenny Henry, Princess Diana, famous rugby players, football players, as well as Barry and Ethel down the local gym. So He
Yeah.
did this study over something like 25 years on 4,500 subjects, measuring them on the isokinetic machines, but comparing those results to his diagnostic tests as a physio.
Okay.
And some of the tests actually correlated really strongly as predictors.
Mm-hmm.
And so the research he did is what he approached me about. I said, look, I've done this research. It's really interesting. The beauty of it is we can do it before people are injured. So I feel that it's a gift we could give to personal trainers.
Mm-hmm.
So what we collaborated with another physio, there was a sports therapist involved back then. And for several years, we started to look at the research, look at the tests, and see how we could evolve them into a system. And so from 2006 till about 2009, we played around with it. We went actually first into sports. So more track and field, running, triathlon.
Yeah.
And we were teaching them quite a bit of the content. And we realized what we were teaching them in one day, now we teach over 3 months.
Yeah.
Overburdened them a bit. So evolved quite a bit. But during that sort of journey, I mean, I'm a British weightlifting coach, a strength and conditioning coach, sports therapy. There's all sorts of behavior change, lots of qualifications I've gathered along the way, but predominantly enjoy being in a room with a group of people and teaching. So sort of the last 20 years, as the education has evolved, the last sort of, since about 2013, we evolved into biomechanics education.
Yeah.
And Martin went off. He's now doing more, his company's called Bright Spot. He does product design and innovation in all sport. We still are inextricably linked. We still speak every week. We still refer and work together, but the businesses are kind of separate.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Obviously, a bit of a mixed background from where you started to come into the where you are now. So obviously, you've worked with the elderly and disabled people with, obviously, and you thought about movement as such from there. So do you think it kind of stemmed from there, really? Do you think that's what it really stemmed from with?
Do you know what?
To come to this point now?
I look back, I reflect back, and I didn't know what I wanted to do until I was about 37. And I literally, my mum and dad were both teachers, so they were very academic. I really wasn't. Whether I'm on a spectrum of some kind, I'm not. I know it's a very current sort of theme at the moment. Yeah. But I think to move, I struggle to sit, read, write. I do that quite a bit, but I have to have a structure to that. So I do think that movement is really what I'm drawn to, and definitely that's where I've just had the confidence, luckily, from my parents, from my Greek dance agent, and then obviously Martin, to just put myself out there and not worry about, not being an academic. Yeah. Because I can, really hold a room and engage a class.
Exactly. That's it. Yeah. So it's using that enthusiasm, that personality, and the characters, as well as having the education on your side as well. So yeah, kind of mix kind of worked well, and I agree with that. Actually, I think you need to have the mix, because it's quite difficult for some people to sit and listen to, obviously, presentations and things like that sometimes as well. If you add some character to it, I think it makes it a lot more enjoyable and a bit more engaging. Definitely agree with that. So basically, let's move more into the specifics more of biomechanics now. So let's get the listeners more educated on what actually biomechanics is, right, Bill?
Yeah. So I mean, it's such a huge topic, and often the end user, the tennis player, or the athlete, doesn't really know what it is. And literally, if you break it down, there's what we classify as two types. And we classify, I think Stuart McGill also talks about two types. He's a world leader in spine biomechanics, and I think he's a professor at Canadian Waterloo University. And that's extrinsic and intrinsic. And extrinsic is what most people, universities teach. And again, there's a spectrum of extrinsic. So in simple terms, biomechanics is the body's mechanics. It's understanding, it's a science around human movement. So at the very simple end, you've got maybe personal trainers, movement coaches, sports coaches, just looking at, does this client, does they have a knee valgus when they do a squat, for example?
Yeah.
You might, to link it back to racket sports, they may make a position or a movement that isn't quite biomechanically efficient. You can observe that extrinsically. Now, what we're used to doing with the extrinsic biomechanics is you see that and then you verbally correct it and or demonstrate a different position or push the knees out if it's a squat, for example. The problem with only focusing on extrinsic, and even when you get to the very sciencey end, so at universities, they'll talk about forces, vectors, levers, first order lever, second order lever, etc. That very complicated end is fascinating. Video analysis, gait analysis. But really, that was the part that Martin felt most of us, you and I, we don't have access to all that fancy, expensive equipment. And we're looking at our athletes and we're wondering, well, how do I know what's going on? Why is their arm swinging that way or their knee buckling in like that when they play or when they run or move? So the intrinsic biomechanics is really the kind of underneath the skin, it's the inside. The extrinsic is what you see on the outside. Intrinsic is, if you like, the three subsystems. So I always enjoy keeping it super simple. Myofascial, skeletal, neural. Yeah. So when that client is squatting or wanting to hit with a racket, get that hand-eye coordination, they will require good pelvic function, maybe some hip abduction, maybe some external rotation in the shoulder. Yeah, definitely. To understand how to assess and evaluate those inner intrinsic biomechanics, that's really what I'm more fascinated by, because that is going to impact on what you see on a video or when they run down a track or across a tennis pitch. Tennis court, I don't do racket sports, or play on a squash court, for example. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it. We see these strange movements, or maybe they're normal for those guys, they're typical. Yeah. But how do we assess that and understand it? So I like to keep it simple. Accessible means you can do it just with your hands on the gym floor or in on the pitch. Whereas the extrinsic, which is fascinating and definitely worth, if you can access it, gives you a lot more information. But the intrinsic biomechanics is where you and I can easily assess a tennis player, squash player, racket athlete to understand how their pelvis works, if their shoulder's functioning well or not, and then what we do about it.
Well, as you were saying there, you're talking about skeletal, neuro, and what was the other one you mentioned, sorry?
Myofascial, skeletal, and neuro.
Yeah, so can we dive into them a little bit and just explain them simply, if that's all right, the three of them?
Yeah, absolutely. So in simple terms, we have a skeletal framework, and that's really the bones that all of the soft tissue hang upon. And then you've got the myofascial layers of muscles, connective tissue, and they're all interlinked through fascia. Fascia is that kind of ligamentous sort of structure. And some of those soft tissues are more pliable and others not so much. So your muscles are more elastic, if you like, than the tendons, and then the tendons are more elastic than the ligaments. And then all of that really is moved by the central nervous system, which is almost like the software of the body. Central nervous system, brain, spinal cord, and then you have the peripheral nerves which go down the limbs. And it's really this central nervous system that talks to the muscles about muscle tone, speed, acceleration, deceleration, joint angles, and then those bones can be your levers. You have some degree of control over, but if you've got really long femurs, your squat is going to look different to somebody with a short femur. So there's some stuff is genetic, some is we can alter and change with joint mobility, muscle flexibility and strength, and neural mobility as well.
Yeah, that sounds, again, you've explained that very well there. So you've obviously touched on a bit about sport with biomechanics. So what I would really like to ask is dig a bit deeper in how you, from your perspective, how do you see biomechanics fitting into sport from maybe previously and also up to now, and what's happening now in the updated sort of realms of biomechanics?
It's funny, because my entire career, my movement career as a dancer and personal trainer, sort of group X, gym instructor, that kind of side of things, we're given these tools to look at clients, athletes moving, and if the joint is not quite in alignment, we're trained to tell them to put that knee in line, so verbally cue or visually cue. Yeah. Virtually, probably 20 years of my career, actually probably still now, that is what the education tells us. Yeah. I've gone deeper into an understanding of the anatomy through intrinsic biomechanics. What I've come to realize is some joint design, if you like, some joint makeup is atypical. So there's a certain kind of population, which is smaller than the main population, who will have a different angle at the neck of their femur into the hip socket. So, for example, a femoral anteversion is when the femur is more medially rotated or more inward at the pelvis. So it might be the acetabulum is more forwards pointing. So this individual can have a different kind of movement to one who has a typical position. You've also got a retroversion of the pelvis where they're more externally rotated. So you can imagine how they're normal for that individual, but they're atypical. These differences are going to alter. You take a tennis player kind of laterally lunging through that frontal plane. If they have more of an anteverted hip, they're going to struggle to externally rotate that hip.
Oh, yeah.
So this sort of understanding, this deeper understanding of atypical variations of the bony prominences, landmarks, joints and structures has helped me appreciate when somebody is moving, instead of simply trying to get them in a line, let's evaluate their function and movement first. So in my world, force production trumps alignment, and it's the ability for that athlete to propel themselves forwards, backwards, sideways, decelerate, accelerate, or move on their forefoot rather than the exact position of the knee joint under the hip. The body will always take what it feels is the best position based on that software, that central nervous proprioception, which will come from both genetics and their training and their adaptation to training modalities. So while there's a lot of talk around alignment and positioning, which is important, we also need to keep in mind these anatomical differences that people have. Just from lifestyle, maybe their tissues have adapted to a certain lifestyle. Life is very asymmetrical, Chris. Asymmetry is quite normal these days.
Yeah, exactly.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Yeah, so what I'm gathering from that is when you're training someone in biomechanics and working with athletes, or when you're educating people as well, it's about the individual. It's not about this, let's all get in the same line sort of thing, you know. It is everything. I've noticed being in this industry now, it's more about, it comes forward more about individuality. I mean, it used, obviously it was still there, but it wasn't spoken about as much. It was a little bit of generalization, but now everything's becoming more individualized, and people are working to what strengths are, and also what they need to work on and improve on, and in their own areas. Not because someone's doing the same over here, they're not going to just do the same over here. It's going to be about the personal touch, I suppose, as much as well as, you know, let's get the basics done as well.
So, and there are tests you can do. This is what we specialize in, is teaching athletes, coaches about ways they can move the body, either for their athletes and or on themselves, to better understand, do they have a more medially rotated hip joint, or you know, what does that mean then when we ask them to do some strength training, either single leg or double leg, to their knee position? Do we allow the knee to maybe go in a certain direction? So it can inform us if we can learn tests like those.
Yeah, that's good. So obviously up-to-date information now also, like, for certainly from your side of things, it sounds like you're not teaching people to be as generalized. You're teaching more to be individualized and work with what they've got, and obviously improve on that as well.
100%. And we all know that, we all realize that, but actually in practice, do we take that into account, or are we trying to force people into a line when we're not really taking on enough information first of all?
I think it is quite a different sort of approach, isn't it, to be honest? I mean, like, for years, I've maybe noticed, I don't know if you have as well, but as you're saying, the generalization maybe 10, 15 years ago was just, you know, be in line with this, with that. But now it's like, well, everyone has to be molded to a different way because everyone is individual and unique.
And we know that. We look at each other and we know, you know, Barry's taller than
exactly.
Dave. Femurs are out here. That's going to change the way.
Yeah, it's going to change everything.
Absolutely. And I wonder sometimes why we're so surprised by these anomalies. So
I know.
got a relationship with another education company who take us into cadaver labs and look at sort of dead bodies, and you see triple-headed biceps, 5 quads, you know, it's, you think, good grief, and we have no idea what's underneath our athlete's skin.
Yeah.
So it's having that open mind, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
When we're coaching, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think you've just hit the nail on the head with having an open mind and being aware of what's in front of you rather than just going, okay, let's just do this. Yeah, so let's move on to what do you from your experience, what does good biomechanics look like on an athlete, for example? Take a rack athlete or just an athlete in general. Say you come across an athlete, you didn't know what sport they'd done. How would you and you watch them move? How would you describe good biomechanics on an athlete?
Oh, that's a great question. So I've worked with some GB athletes, and one was an Olympic lifter, Laura Hewitt. So she went to the European gold there. So quite a different frame to Jonathan Broome-Edwards, who is a Paralympic T44 high jumper.
Yeah.
He won the gold at Tokyo. And these different body types. So obviously with Jonathan Broome-Edwards, he's a Paralympian. So he was born with a difference in one foot to the other.
Yeah.
So I guess it links back to the last conversation we've just had. I think looking at a good, robust athlete isn't just about their physicality. Obviously, that is a huge part of it. So Laura, who's an Olympic lifter, she needs a certain framework. Now, those short femurs are going to be an advantage to an Olympic lifter because predominantly the snatch, clean and jerk require them to concertina down in that plane. And so they're going to be more balanced in that concertina. With Jonathan, it's quite different. He's much longer and leaner, and that is relevant to his sport as a high jumper. So we've got to look at the sport for a start, because that's going to dictate what good genetics will play into that. I think it's less about what I'm looking at. It's more about, are they optimized? Are they playing well? Are they injury free?
Yeah.
And where are they in their ranking? So it's kind of, there's more to it. And there's a really there's a guy called Tim Gabbett, and he's in Australia, and he does a huge amount of research. You can find him on Instagram. Tim Gabbett does a workshop called Load Management and Tissue Tolerance. Fantastic workshop. And he works with elite rugby players, female rugby players he did some studies with. And it's really understanding when you're managing load, it isn't just how long they play on the court. So in tennis, you know, if they're winning, they're going to be playing over and over and over again. So that there's that endurance component, even though it's a short burst kind of physical activity, you've got that kind of interval aspect to it. So he talks about load management. You've got to take into account sleep, climate, recovery, nutrition, hormones. So I think, and I'm not trying to dodge your question, but so for example, my build, if you like, my genetics are really disadvantageous to me wanting to do a snatch, clean or jerk. My limbs are too long and my joints are too loose, but I can get into a deep squat. So I think we've got to layer it back into the sport itself. So to come back to your example of a racket sport, you know, you look at, isn't it Federer with the arm?
Roger Federer?
Yeah. And he's got this different sizes in arm.
Yeah.
So normal, healthy biomechanics, that tells me there's something not right there, because he has an asymmetry. He's dominant on one side. So through everyday life, asymmetry raises risk biomechanically. And yet he's a world level tennis playing athlete with this asymmetry. So what does good biomechanics look like? Well, it's the gold medalists, and it's the ones who don't get injured or at least get injured.
Yeah.
But there's so many different ways that could look. So Federer is a great example of that asymmetry, which in biomechanical terms we go, no, we need to be as symmetrical as possible. It's a tough question it's a great question, but it's a hard one to answer. If you go back again, and I'm sorry for the younger listeners, but he's still he's a track athlete, actually, or he was a track athlete. Michael Jordan, is it Michael Jordan? Johnson. He was a 400-meter runner, sprinter back in the 80s, gold medalist. Technique, biomechanics, all four. He had this kind of very extended, protracted neck, slight rotation, but he was a gold medal winner. So great biomechanics versus gold medal.
Yeah.
To answer the question, which one do you want to pick?
So basically, for me, that comes back down against that what we spoke about earlier, individualizing the sort of individual, looking at individual and working it from there, really. Yeah, so I think you've kind of spoken about how much kind of biomechanics can affect athletic performance kind of throughout what we've spoken about. So for the last 5-10 minutes, I just want to speak about yourself, like obviously about your company, and like just tell us a bit about where you can be found and what courses you're kind of doing, and if you've written any books, etc., where they can be found. So just the floor is yours for that now. So
yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, Chris. And really, yeah, if you put my name into social media, Rachel Francis Thomson, Thomson without a P, or Biomechanics Education will come up. And we actually, as a group, we feel really passionately and strongly about helping racket coaches, athletics coaches, as well as the athletes, and everybody helping the elderly move well, the disabled move well, going back to my background, to understand techniques to improve movement from the inside. So what's unique about the program we teach is it's like a preparation for movement. And I don't mean stretching, and I don't mean a pulse raiser. What I'm talking about is we get these modern elements from sitting on Zoom, doing webinars and studying and talking to people. And our body is designed to move. So techniques we've taken actually are from rehabilitation. So we teach muscle energy techniques, neural mobilizations, and pure joint mobilizations. They're quite different to what we might be more familiar with. And these can really be gold dust to an athlete. We improved spinal velocity by over 200% by doing 2 rounds of 15 reps of a nerve mobilization on the sciatic nerve. In a rugby player, we improved his quad strength output by 50% in 10 days by literally using the same nerve mobilization. So a racket sport athlete who needs to move fast and quick moving. So that's basically that's what we're teaching. So it's quite different, but it combines with the assessment. So people can find us Biomechanics Education. We're on Facebook, Instagram is really good. I've just started TikTok. If you find me over on there, you might enjoy the outfit I'm wearing. Everybody else seems to. It's just an outfit to me. Facebook. And in terms of books, I haven't written any books as yet, but if you go to the website and click on blog, the blogs are pretty meaty. They could make up a book if I end up putting them all together. So that's biomechanics.education.com.
Brilliant. Okay, Rachel. I think we'll end it there, but I appreciate you coming on. And as Rachel says, she's giving you all our social medias, all our sort of biomechanics.education.com, academy.com, is it?
Yes.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, there you go. You can see it there. Yep. Yep, no problem. Okay, Rachel, thanks for coming on. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for inviting me. Really appreciate it, Chris.
Okay, folks, that's another episode of the Racket Athlete Podcast. Speak to you soon.